They don't mind you.
All right, and just to quickly recap, now that we have the recording running, our goal today is to do several things. We're going to start by pulling the list from Blackbaud that includes grade data for multiple terms, for multiple courses, for each student. We're then going to take that data, we're going to feed it out to Power BI, and then we'll look at the ways that we can display that in 100 different useful ways within Power BI. Our initial goal is to get one row per student per course that has a column for each of the grades that the student has earned, but then we're going to look at some other cool things that we can do with that. And so with that, Amy, can I ask you to share your screen? We can jump in and kind of go from there. Okay, perfect. And so I'll request remote control, and we can build this together. But having seen some of the things that Amy's already built, I know that she knows her lists inside out. Sometimes this is the hardest part of getting started, is knowing where to go to get the information we're looking for within a list. So we'll start by just creating an advanced list. On my screen, I'm going to pull up the sorry, the email I sent yesterday that had the details around the lists that we'll be using, and we'll just mirror that. So I've got that on my other screen. And what we're going to do here is we're going to start with the user base. A couple of the other recordings that I've got posted out on my site kind of go through in a lot more detail, kind of how and why we're doing some of the things we're doing through this building process. I'm going to go relatively quickly today, just so we can get to the fun part and the actual building in Power BI. We've got the user base. I'm going to grab the from the academic group, we're going to pull the course enrollment. We're going to pull the course group, so one level deeper than the course enrollment. And then we're going to pull the course base, just so we can go back and pull some really simple stuff around, course name and course code and other things that might be useful. I'm also going to grab the course faculty, and that enables us to do some really interesting things. Here we go. And then I'm going to pull the user base tied to that course faculty entry. So we can pull the name of the teacher as well. And we'll say that that is going to be tied to the faculty. There we go. And then the last thing we're going to do is just pull the enrollment grade, which is grading. Yeah, there we go. For our purposes today, I'm going to leave all of these as inner joins. There may be times where in building this, there's some value in changing that. But in our case, we really only want to see cases where, it is students who are enrolled in a course that has a teacher that have a grade that's been earned. So we don't necessarily want to see blanks in our list. We really just want to pull some of the details that we're looking at. I'm going to go to our filters next. And then within our filters, we're going to grab a few more things. So the enrollment grade school year is 23-24. And we could do this, one of a million different ways. So right now we're saying only show us the current year grades. But if there's value in being able to build just like a really quick glimpse at a transcript, we could not restrict this to just the current year. And then we could use that school year within Power BI as a filter to be able to show, multiple years of grades in just a very quick view. And so we'll select that. And then what's my other filter there? I've got my, I only want to pull the teacher that's marked as the head teacher. So if I've got multiple teachers tied to a course, I don't want to get multiple rows for each student because I've got multiple teachers. So not as frequently used in the upper divisions, but I see a lot in lower divisions. Course faculty head, there we go. And we'll say is true. And then actually, I want to make sure, I'll pull just the active student enrollments as well. So if a student has dropped a class, maybe I don't want to see that information. Maybe I do. Maybe there's value in seeing it at other times. But for now, I'm going to start with only those actively enrolled students. So I'm going to say the course enrollment dropped equal to 0, which is on the back end. It's just saying that they're not marked as a drop student in that course. And actually, let me see. So John asked a question. Is there a way to make this list always have the academic year equals the current year? There is. It gets a little bit sticky because we've got to go through some updates to the way that we're doing the select objects. So here, I guess in this case, it might be pretty clean. I think that's worth looking at here. So under school, nope, not school. Where does it live? There's a, actually, you know what? In this case, there may not be. When I'm doing a user register entry, a lot of times I can do that. But I don't know if I can do that here. Good question, John. And it's something I do all the time in other types of reporting. But if I've got potentially multiple year filters that come into play, sometimes it's cleaner just to make that adjustment in the list itself and do it once a year, and you'll know that you've got that info done. In our display fields, what am I looking at here? All right, so I'm going to grab user ID. We'll get the first name, the last name. I'm going to grab grad year. Under the course enrollment, I'm going to grab the, actually, we need to drill down a little further into the course group. We'll grab the group identifier so we know which section the student's in. Under the course base, we'll grab the course title, course code. Under the course faculty, we'll get some teacher info. So we'll get their first name, their last name. Under the enrollment grade, let's get the grade and the school year. And then let me just select that and we'll see if that's given us most of what we're looking for. We can add literally any field we want. So if we wanted to pull department, or if we wanted to pull the block in which a course meets, or anything like that, we can grab all kinds of additional detail. I'm starting relatively simple here, but I want to show how, once we've built this report, if we decide, wait a minute, we do want to see the department, we can jump back into Blackbaud, we can tweak our list, and then we can pull that updated information really cleanly out to Power BI. So I'm going to just call that st_id. This will be st_first. This will be st last. St grad year. We'll leave the rest of those alone. Let's call that grade. Call that year. And of course, the marking column. I'm sorry, I didn't include that initially, but I want to see which grade plan these are tied to. So I'll add those again in just a moment. This will be t_first, and then t_last. And then actually we'll pull some credit. Actually, I'm going to leave credits out of this for now, because if we're looking at within a single year, credits can start to get a little sticky on us. But I definitely do need to see which marking period this grade was earned in. So the enrollment grade, I may have to go add another node to be able to grab that. Let's close this. We're going to jump back into our select. And then let's look at our, what am I going to look for? 100 grading, grade plan grade. There we go. And somebody asked a question. I can't remember whether it was in this email string or actually I did a presentation last week at the Atlas conference out in Reno with a client who's done some really, really deep dives into some of this grade setup. I think it was there that somebody asked it, but somebody asked if we could use, earned grades alongside transfer grades for a lot of this type of reporting, and we absolutely can. We would just end up building separate lists to pull the grades that were earned within Blackbaud versus the grades that came into Blackbaud as transfer grades. If either they were earned at an outside school, or if you guys implemented Blackbaud in the last year or two, and we want to be able to pull more history from that transfer section, so we can certainly overlay that information very cleanly. And actually, when I send the link to this recording, I've also posted the demo Power BI report that Brian Jarvis from Norfolk Academy and I built and presented at the conference. But there's some really, really cool stuff in there if anybody wants to kind of poke through that as well. So in the grade plan grade, we need to say, we'll get the grade description. I think that's what we're looking for. And then let's just preview. We'll just see if what we're looking at makes sense here. And Amy, you can help us validate whether these numbers make sense. So if I grab by student ID, I'm looking at current year. I can see the course section. I can see the course. I can see the grade that the student earned. Let me look for that same student and just make sure. Yeah, perfect. So for that student, I've got a Q1 grade, I've got a Q3 grade. I've got, some of them have some midterm exams. Do these look, Amy, like the grades we'd expect to see for the students? Okay, awesome. And it's something where, every school is going to have these a little bit differently. You may call it quarter, you may call it semester, you may call it midterm exam, you may call it S1 exam. So
can you close it?
Now takes me.
I'm sorry. Nope, I'm sorry. So if this info looks good, we're just going to grab this, we'll feed it to Power BI, and we'll do our building. So again, in one of the other recorded sessions, I think the very first one we did, we looked at how we can go through all the, I guess I need to name it, don't we? So we'll call this PBI current year grade data. And then Amy, I don't know if you've got these. All right, awesome. So I'll dump these in your Power BI folder. And then what I like to do, and it's become less important now that Blackbaud has changed the fact that we can see the, see some useful things. Let me just do this. Oh, here we go. Oh, excellent. So it looks like Amy had already done some of that setup on that list, but I wanted to talk through a little bit of kind of how we were going to look at it. This ID is a critical number that we need in pulling the data from Blackbaud to Power BI. And I like to make that searchable when I'm searching. So generally what I do is I'll grab that list ID. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to edit my list and just pop that into the name just so that I can search based on that list ID if I ever need to work backwards and determine which list in Blackbaud fed information out to Power BI. In the report that I did with Brian Jarvis from Norfolk Academy, I think we have like 27 different lists that are feeding academic and advisory and athletic and test score and 100 different layers of data. It's just nice to be able to very quickly search based on that ID and then have that come up. Even though it's displayed right there, that search doesn't look at that field. It only looks at that title. So not necessary, but sometimes helpful to have that tied in there. In the role access, this is where we're going to share with the Web Services API Manager. And really, that's the tool that lets us push the data through the API to Power BI. And at this point, because Amy has already been feeding a whole bunch of data from Blackbaud to Power BI, we don't need to set up the new dummy user with the key and the secret. She's already done a lot of that legwork. I'm going to skip past that or kind of go through it quickly today. But the other recordings go through in some detail, kind of where and how that's set up. Amy, do you want to share any thoughts on kind of what those steps look like for you as you were getting that set up for the first time?
I mean, those steps were relatively easy because I just followed exactly what you told us to do in the earlier videos. So that worked great. One issue that I had when I was merging different lists in Power Query, I forgot to change the role axe. I did it on the first one, but then I copied and made some changes and forgot to update the role access on other ones. So when I went to refresh my data, only one of my 4 queries would come in. So that was a key thing that I forgot to do.
And I think so much of it is, I have 0 minutes of formal training in Power BI, so I've kind of beaten my head against it long enough to figure things out. There may be more efficient ways to do some of the things we're doing, but what we're doing works. And I think it's once you've found a way that works, stick with it, and keep going.
Yep.
So we've got the ID here. I'm going to copy that. And Amy, can we open one of your other Power BI files to use as our starting point, just so we don't have to start from scratch and building out the code?
Definitely.
Awesome.
Here's.
Yeah, Amy sent me a copy of this last week, or one that she'd been working on, and it's just really, really impressive stuff. Looking at a lot of interesting different types of data.
Hold on a sec. Doesn't want to go to the screen that I'm sharing.
There we go. Looks like it's trying now. There we go.
Yep.
All right, awesome. So really what we can do is if we just open this and do a quick save as, then we'll just hijack the code that you've already written, swap out our list ID, make a tweak to a couple things on the back end, and we're off and running. But this is awesome. This is what Amy built after one of our sessions a while back, where she pulled all of her admissions data, or I'm sorry, attendance data, and it's got all kinds of cool stuff here. So I'm not gonna break what she has. I'm just gonna do a save as, and we'll just let it live in your wherever, and then you can tweak if you want. So we'll call it grade. And then let's put it in your documents, I guess. There we go. It's going to make us choose somewhere. Move it anywhere you want. And the reason I do that is because she's already done the hard work of setting up our query that contains the key and the secret and the school's domain and the like the list ID. She's copied and pasted that code that I've shared out. So what we're going to end up doing is just editing this query. And all that we're going to do here is, she's done all the hard work. Because this is a saved copy, I'm going to get rid of the name attendance. We're going to just call this grades. And then I'm going to go into my advanced editor. And I'm just going to get rid of a whole bunch. Oops, actually, hold on. Looks like this is the appended version. All right, excellent.
Yeah, this is the merged. Yeah.
Got it. So let's do this. Beautiful. And that's beautiful because, another thing that Amy's done here is, because if we're trying to pull too much data through a single list, sometimes it's going to fail. I don't know how many of you guys were impacted by that 50,000 rows and then the list being cut to 20,000 available rows a month or two ago. But if we can't get everything we need through a single list, what Amy's done here is awesome, in that we can pull multiple lists and then stitch them together into one list that can then, from the Power BI side, contain all of the data that we're looking for in one spot. So actually, this is the one I'm going to copy. So we'll call this one, grade data. And then I'm going to jump into her advanced editor, which will break everything she's already built in this visual, but because it's a save as, it won't make a difference for us. Let me copy that value here. I'm going to have to get rid of these bottom rows because the columns themselves are different. But I'll just put it in and then convert it to table. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There we go. So I made, one little tweak, and what that's going to do is just go pull that other list from Blackbaud as opposed to the attendance one that she'd used previously. And then I'm going to get rid of these other queries from this copied version, just so they're not throwing anything off. No, actually, we'll get rid of this one here. Let's see if we can get rid of these as well. Same thing here. And then now our grade data, we'll say enable load. And it looks like she had done some tweaking on the back end just to, we'll just do an import. There we go. It's awesome. And then now, basically what we've done is we've told it, go grab that list, bring it out here. And again, we go into this in much, much, much more detail in the other recording. But when I expand this column, it's going to show up exactly in the same way as it looked from within Blackbaud when I looked at that advanced list record. And so couple things I'm going to tweak. Actually, we don't really have any dates. Occasionally, I'm going to change some column header types for dates. That's critically important. Otherwise, the system doesn't know what to do with those values. It sees them as text by default. But here I'm seeing a lot of good information. Actually, I made one mistake there. I want to adjust. I'm going to tell it not to include that column 1 entry at the beginning, because that just gets a little bit confusing to look at.
One thing that kind of tripped me up at one point was I made a bar graph by grade and by class grade, and had forgotten to change the grade type in the spreadsheet to numeric, not text. So it would not go in the right order.
That's perfect. So let's just show how we can change that, because by default, this ABC123, it just assumes that's a text value. I'm going to tell it that that's a whole number. Are there any non-whole numbers, Amy, or do you know if there may be any, decimals hiding in here?
No, they'll all hold numbers.
Okay, awesome. So we've converted that so that those are numerics, and I can now see that on the header here. Names being text is perfect. Course code, actually, I prefer that as a text. If there's a leading 0, then I want that to be a text entry rather than a numeric. Well, you New England zip codes, that comes into play all the time there. The grad year, because I want that to sort cleanly, I'm going to make that a whole number as well. And actually, it would work fine in either way. But sometimes if you've got the 1900s and it sees it as text, it's going to treat it differently. And the rest of those look good. So we're going to close and apply. And now, so this is going to blow up everything Amy's built here, but this is our saved copy. So it's gonna bark at us 100 different ways, but we'll just end up deleting these pages and then setting up a new one. And there we go. So that number ties to what we saw in Blackbaud. We've got some errors. I really quickly want to look at what those are. It could be, if there's a blank grade or like a pass or something like that. Could be that is the source of our error. Let's just see. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's it. So I bet there was something in there. The MED. So it looks like there's some
medical.
sort of
Yep.
and that's fine. So that doesn't bother me one bit. What we'll end up doing is just getting rid of that error query. We could always come through and scrub it. Actually, yeah, we'll just delete the group. But anything that's not a numeric will have errored out at this point, because we told it that those are numeric entries. The numeric piece is important there, because if I wanted to do averages, if I wanted to do other things, we do need it to see that as a number. So there are ways that we can do other things. So I'm going to close and apply. We've still got our grade data. I'm just going to get rid of these 3 tabs. And we'll just start totally fresh. But now what we've done is we've built our list in Blackbaud. Amy had already done the legwork of setting up the user to enable us to pull that information through the API to Power BI. The first time you do it, it might take, 10, 15 minutes, and it's something, shoot me a note. We'll hop on a Zoom. I'll get you going really quickly. If that's helpful as you're getting started. But it's also outlined in the, oops, I guess it's going to make me have something there. Outlined in one of the previous recordings. And then once we've fed this list from Blackbaud to Power BI, we've done a tiny bit of touch up to the data types that we're looking at. And now we're just looking at the data as it lives in Blackbaud as we're looking at that. And actually, before I start the building, I did see a couple of questions come in. So from Jocelyn, to compare year to year in Power BI, do you typically just build another list each year in Blackbaud and connect to Power BI, or do you have one list with all enrollment years and then just add each year to that list every year? That is a phenomenal question, Jocelyn. And it depends on how many rows are in your list within Blackbaud, because I found that as you get nearer that 50,000 row number within an advanced list, you'll get the occasional failure in pulling the data from Blackbaud to Power BI. When you hit 100,000, you'll get almost every time failure. So I generally try to keep the length of a list that I'm feeding from Blackbaud under 50,000 rows. And generally that works really cleanly. So, to mirror what Amy did on the attendance side, we could build a separate list for each year. And then once we pull to Power BI, there's a tool that lets us just append that information, basically stack one list on top of the other. So I may have, 5 different lists that have historic grade information within Blackbaud, but as long as they're formatted exactly the same way, my headers are exactly the same, I would just load those 5 lists from Blackbaud to Power BI and then use the append tool to stack them on top of each other to get that single data set that's got multiple years of data. In Amy's case, looks like we had roughly 18,000, 19,000 rows of data within this year. I would be hesitant to try to pull more than one year's worth of grades just based on that number that we saw. If your school has, 60 kids in the upper school and you've got, 4,000 rows of grade data for the year, I'd have no problem putting multiple years together in a single list coming from Blackbaud. Another question from Seth. Is it true that we have to create anything new in the Windows desktop client? We can't do any of this work in the web version. In theory, we could do some, but with the query that we use, the blank query that we use to pull this data from Blackbaud to Power BI, I found it just infinitely easier to do in the desktop version. And what that means is we can only do this building on a Windows machine or on a Mac running Parallels. But the Power BI desktop software only runs on the Windows operating system. Even if 99% of your users are Mac users, once we've done the building on the Windows machine, we can publish it out online. Any user on any device in any browser in any operating system can access this information, but the building itself, I generally do on a Windows machine using the Power BI desktop software. It's more powerful, more dynamic, and just gives us more options on how we're connecting the data that we're looking at. So another follow-up question, the free version of Power BI, absolutely. So please don't pay a penny for any of the software that you guys are using to do it. The free version of Power BI is exactly what I use, probably what Amy uses as well. Where Blackbaud starts to ping you is once we've built these awesome reports and we want to distribute them out, share them with other users, then Blackbaud charges a per user, I'm sorry, Blackbaud, not Blackbaud, Microsoft charges a per user per month fee to be able to distribute those reports. Generally for nonprofit or education pricing, it's on the range of $2 to $3 per user per month. So if you have, 10 users who are looking at this type of report, then you might be looking at, $300-400 a year in licensing cost. And really the beauty of that is that keeps everything behind a login in Microsoft's login or online environment, just ensures that everything is totally secure. In theory, you could take some side doors and just publish them out and have security by obscurity. But the minute that we've got any personal information or any grade data or even student names, I like to hide everything behind that Microsoft login. So that's where some of the cost starts to build. That doesn't get terrible unless you're trying to distribute to every user on campus. And if that's the case, the level of licensing agreement with Microsoft, I think that A5 level includes a Power BI Pro license for every user. I think the A3 is where you're still paying something per user per month. So happy to get into that in detail if anybody's looking at the, deployment options. So sorry, quick aside there. But thank you for the questions and keep them coming. But now this is the fun part. So really what we're going to be doing here is just building a quick little matrix where within my matrix, I'm going to do a couple different things. So I'm going to start by, actually, we'll add a little slicer up front. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's just build a column that has the student last name, comma, first name, space, grad year. And we'll just call it name, or ST name equals last, student last, and student first, and grab the grad year. Yeah, ST grad year. Okay, there we go. ST grad year. So now I've just got this new column where I've just concatenated, for me, it would be Clemens, comma, Matthew, 2002, if we're looking at that information. So I'm going to throw this out as a slicer. I'm going to put that student name in there. And then what that's done is just give us a very quick way to search for a single student. Those checkboxes, that's not particularly useful. So I'm going to tweak the way that we're looking at that. And in that visual, in my slicer settings, I'm going to make that a drop down. And then I'm also going to make it searchable. So there we go. So now if I'm looking for a single student, I can just pull that drop down, start typing. So let's find anybody with Kate in the name. I can very quickly search for a student, pull up their info. And then as we're looking at the grade information itself, we'll see how that can be really, really interesting and useful. So now I want to be able to see a list of, every course that student's enrolled in. And then I just want to see columns with each of the grades that the students earned in that course. So I'm going to start by grabbing the course title. And at this point, if I were to pull a single student, so Kate Murphy, that's going to isolate just the courses that Kate has grades in for this year. Or I can go, student to student, set different layers of detail. And then now this is so cool and so simple, but basically we're just building a little pivot table. So if we were to pivot this info in Excel, we're doing the Power BI equivalent of that, where I'm going to tell it that the grade description is the column that I'm looking at. So that's just showing me all of the places where a grade could be earned. And then really, I'm going to say, just show me the grade, like show me the actual grade. And then maybe I don't want the sum, maybe I want the average. So I could just very quickly see, that student, or that any student, as I'm working through them, I've just got a really quick way of looking at that data. So I can see the Q1 grades, Q2 grades, Q3 grades, get the midterm exams. I can change the ordering as well. So because every school is going to call these something different, I don't want to, force anything into a bucket. Q1 or Q2 might be called, S1 or S1 final, and then midterm exam might be S1 exam, and then, final average might be just final. So 100 different ways that we're doing it. But I'm going to go into our query and I'm going to force a sort order so that I can see them in the order in which they're actually earned. So what I'm going to do is within my grade data, I'm going to edit the query. And there's 100 ways to do this. I'm just going to use kind of some blunt force here to do it. We're going to do we're going to add a column, and we're going to do a custom column. And then can I do a switch statement here? No, I can't. All right, let me do it slightly differently then. Yeah, it's kind of where and how we're using this dictates several different things. So let's do a conditional column. And we'll just call it marking period sort, or MP sort. And I'll just say if the grade description equals Q1, then 1. If the grade description equals Q2, then 2, and we'll just keep going. So we're going to force this in at the query level because I could write a conditional statement within the actual data set, but it'll see a circular reference if I do that. There's some quirky stuff with the way that Power BI looks at and uses that data, where if I do it at the query level and it sees it loading with this information included up front, it just enables us to do more things with it. So we'll just kind of pull out the 6 entries we saw. And Amy, I'm sorry, do you remember what those what the others were called, what the semester or the midterm?
I think it was midterm exam.
Perfect. And we'll fix it. So if I get that incorrect, we'll be able to come back and adjust it. And then what do we have?
That's Q3. Question, there's no Q4s yet. Would we add in a Q4 at this point in the grade description sort?
Absolutely. That's future proof and make life easy. That'll just mean that nothing's going to have this value, but that's fine. We can just get ahead of it. Oops. Yeah, come on, Matt. There we go. And then what were the other entries that we saw there? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
There's final AVG.
Is it there's space there?
Space, I think, yep.
And was there one more before that as well?
Not yet. There will be a final exam.
Okay.
But that's not in there yet.
I'll put that as 9, just in case other stuff comes in there. So we'll say grade description equals and we'll call that, I don't know, we'll call it 6 for now. But we can tweak all those settings. I'm going to say okay to that. And what that's doing is just creating a new column over at the far side where it's the Q1 now has that value of 1. Q3 now has that value of 4. Let's just make sure I didn't. So final AVG. I think midterm exam, I think I did that incorrectly. Yeah, I need to change that to be mid space term exam. And then I want to make sure that I've got, numbers in each of those buckets. Perfect. So I've got a number tied to everything except for that Q4 entry. And once we've got a Q4 grade, the 5 will get assigned the next time that we refresh the data. So having done that, I'm going to close and apply this change to the query. And then I can do some pretty cool stuff out here. I'm just going to tell it that I want to sort based on that sort column and looking at the information left to right across the page. So I'm going to say that anywhere in this report where I'm looking at the grade description, I want to sort by that column called, what do I call it? MP sort. And what that's going to do, there we go. So I've got Q1, Q2, midterm exam, Q3, final average. Q4 is just going to pop in there at a later date once we pull that information in. So really, I think, the initial question that, spurred our conversation around setting this up was, is there a way to quickly get this type of report, get this information? I can look at this per student, or I can go 1,000 layers deeper. So, right now, this is showing me average grades for every course because I can see what was the average grade within the course within each of the marking periods. I could do all kinds of interesting things with that. So I can sort that and show Looks like got a handful of courses that are really highly graded. I bet there's some at the other end of the spectrum as well, where, yeah, maybe not as many kids, but we could very quickly see some of that type of info. Because we've pulled out the teacher name, the section identifier, we could use this exact same data set to say what's the average grade. If there are 2 teachers teaching, freshman English, what's the average grade across each of those 2 sections? Or, what's the average grade within a block? I mean, if there's a block that always meets at the end of the day because we're something related to athletics, or always meets at the beginning of the day, there's 1,000 different ways we could slice and dice this very simple data set to tell 100 different stories to 100 different users. Questions, thoughts? Anybody? I know we went through a lot of that pretty quickly, but I just wanted to, quickly show some things. Do you recommend excluding courses we use for testing purposes in that Blackbaud list? Great question there, Jocelyn. So really, you can do it one of several ways. So if I know what those course IDs are and I can exclude them from the Blackbaud list, I love going that route because then I can look back at that list. I can look at the filters. I can understand exactly how I got to that point of, what data got fed from Blackbaud to Power BI. But if I got to this point and said, you know what, hold on, I don't want any of my, middle school courses to be listed here. Maybe I'm just concerned with high school. I could do a couple different things. I can put a filter on where, maybe, I guess I didn't grab a division. Let's say that we want to add the division and that we also want to add the department. Maybe I want to kind of take this data set and find what's the average grade in each department, right now, or what was the average grade in Q3 in each department this year. Let's go back into our list and add some columns where we can start telling some of those stories. So we're going to save the student grade report. And then, Amy, can we jump back in?
Yep.
We're going to edit this guy. And we'll look at how we can very quickly just tweak a couple settings in here, add some info, and then have that new information to be able to work with in Power BI. So I'm going to select fields. We're going to jump in and let's see what we've got. So I want to get a, under the course group, let's see if I can get a, I think I've got a department ID here, but I need to add some layers to get an actual department. Let me get the school level so I can know whether it's a middle school or an upper school grade or course. Just very quickly see those pieces of info. And then I'm also going to add the object that lets me grab the department, which is actually a lot more complicated than it seems like it should be. But when I jump into the academic group, I need to add the course department, and I need to make sure that that comes out in the way that I need it. Okay, I've got the course department, and then I need the academic department under the course department because the course department is just a numeric, and then the academic department translates that numeric into a text value that we can actually use. So then let me go back to my display fields, and let's just grab a couple more things there. So I've got the school level, course department, then academic department. I'm going to grab that sort order because then I don't have to go through that work of rebuilding the sort order in Power BI. I can just leverage the sort order that we've already input in Blackbaud. And then let me output the department here as well. And then let's select. And let's just make sure that that gives us, the same number of grades with some, additional useful information. Awesome. So I've got, the fact that those are middle school grades. Looks like there's no sort order. That's fine. We can force that within Blackbaud, or we don't need a department sort order. A lot of times even alpha by department, does the job for us. One thing I'll notice though is that I bet there's a couple departments that are tied to individual courses. So our number jumped here a little bit. And that's probably because there, maybe there's an 8th grade course that's tied to a weird 9th grade department for course recommendations where you need the middle school advisor. I mean, there's layers of weird things that could be going on there. We could filter out specific departments if we wanted to, either from the list level or when we get the data out to Power BI, we could do the filtering there. So a lot of potential ways to slice that. So I'm going to save and exit this list. We've pulled some info in. And actually, while we're here, any other data points that would be interesting that you can think of offhand, either Amy or anybody else, that we may want to pull related to courses or grades or anything else? Okay, I think this is good because we'll see how we can very quickly jump to the next spot. And Jocelyn, to your question on the test course, could absolutely do that. So you could throw a filter in, and you could put the course name does not include test, or course ID not one of, and we could very quickly remove those at the highest level, just so that info never makes it over to the Power BI side. But I do love that ability to validate the list before I pull it across, because then I know exactly what I'm looking for. And John, great point. So course length could be helpful. So seeing half-year courses versus full-year courses, you do a lot of interesting things there. So now I've saved the changes to that list, and that's it. I haven't done anything different. I'm just going to come back here. I'm going to go home. I'm going to say refresh, and it's going to run back to Blackbaud. It's going to pull in that, now 29,000 rows of data, or 29 and change, rather than the 18 we saw, probably because of some, duplicate departments. Or not duplicate departments, but courses with multiple departments. Yeah, 29,061. And now Power BI sees that that data is there, but notice that I'm not seeing that information over here yet under the grade data query. So I'm going to edit my query. I'm now able just to make one quick tweak here. I'm going to come into this expanded column 1 step, this applied step. I'm going to click my little gear icon over here, and it will now give me the option to include those newly added fields that we added to the list within Blackbaud. So that school level, the sort order, and the department, I'll say include those. And then let's look at a couple other quick things that we could do here as well. So if I wanted to, let's get rid of anything that has that MSHS bridge. It feels like that's probably a course request thing that's doing some quirky stuff and duplicating some entries. So I'm going to uncheck anything that has that bridge, because those probably have another department tied to them as well that they're used for general use. And then we'll just say okay to that. And the sort order, do we have anything in there? We don't. Okay, that's fine. So, we've got a field, we're just not going to use it. I could, in theory, delete it from here, but no reason I need to do that. So now I'm going to close and apply.
Matt, this is always where I cross my fingers, because this is where I get in trouble sometimes.
Right.
All of a sudden it says, nope, can't do that.
Right. And that's part of the fun of Power BI is, the learning curve is pretty steep, but it is so insanely powerful. And in this case, this worked, but sometimes if you make what feels like a minor tweak, then you kind of get stuck. And online resources are wonderful. Microsoft's got a million different forums where generally you can dig and search for answers. Let me do this, or work with somebody like me who is thrilled to help you guys through the process. If anybody would like either some help doing this, or just tell me go away and build this stuff and come back when it's done, I do a lot of that as well. So let me do this. I'll pull a school level filter where I can choose, let's choose just our high school. And then we can do the same thing for department as well. So I'll add another slicer. And that one, rather than the school level, let's grab the department. And there, let's say, what, show me just my, how come I have no math? What did I do?
All girls school.
Sorry, but looking at just
Oh,
the
math.
math
Oh, we
department.
lost it.
We did.
Yeah.
So I bet I screwed that up. Let me go back to our query, and I bet if that bridge is actually the name of the department, I bet I broke something there. So
Okay.
looking at that. So let's jump back into that filtered rows. Actually, yeah, here we go. This filtered rows entry. And yeah, I'll just leave everything alone, actually. We'll just keep it as is. Let me get rid of that step entirely. So we're not going to pull those out. There may be some, rhyme or reason or some times where we may want to look at that information differently, but I just want to kind of see here how we could very quickly kind of live in that space. So it's going to reload. It'll grab all of that info. There we go. So now if I were to look at that department, there we go. I've got my mathematics. And I can very quickly see, what's my average grade for each course in mathematics, or, I could use this exact same visual to say, what, show me, either one student at a time or one grade level at a time, what are average grades, or I could just say, show me that student with their grades. But all of that underlying data just lets us tell, a million different stories about what we're looking at and working with here. So I know we're getting close to 2 o'clock on the East Coast. Thoughts, questions, anything that we haven't covered or that would be useful to talk through?
A random question. Sometimes in my slicers, the clear all selection eraser, I don't see. Is there a reason for that?
Let's see. Let me do a couple, and I want to see what we see.
I think it's available for all of yours, but sometimes that just doesn't show up.
Like this little guy here, this clear
Yep,
selection.
exactly.
Huh.
I don't know if it's because of the visual I have selected.
I don't know, because generally it's there. Let me just take a quick look here. Is there an option? It's not there. There's two different spots that we would look for it. So part of it, one of them is in those three little dots where we can do, some things. The other one is over here in the slicer settings, in the selection. There's a select all option. Multi-select, I generally leave it at that, but I don't know why that clear would not be there. Amy, shoot me the file if you see it, and I can take a quick peek and we can figure it out.
Okay.
All right, so I saw a note from Vanessa. Can we show the formula for the custom field? Yeah, absolutely. And there's, it's literally just, Excel, minor tweaks to Excel code for concatenation. So what I did here, and I know that's a bit of an eye chart through the screen, I just said, give me the last name. The ampersand is basically the concatenate button. And then, comma, ampersand, first name, ampersand, put in a space, ampersand, and then the grad year. So it's just merging that information into a single field for us. Yeah. So Anne-Marie, flip back to that complicated attendance dashboard and contrast it with this. I think, Amy just did such an amazing job. She shared that with me last week or maybe the week before. And I was just blown away that she had just taken kind of some of what we had done in some of the sessions and run with it. So I've done some work with Amy's admissions office on some different types of reporting, but just really, really cool to see her take it and just, run. So Mariana, yep, I'll share the recording. Karen, correct that we cannot use a Mac for the building unless you're running parallel. So basically you have to be running Windows operating system. I've got several schools that do use parallels and that works. That does the job. So as long as you can run a Windows operating system on your machine, you're good. A lot of schools I work with have a device or a couple devices, like a cheap Windows Surface laptop is all that I use. It doesn't need to be the most powerful Windows machine on the planet. Do all of my building on that Windows desktop.
Man, I have a question about actually the one that you showed where I have Q1 attendance, Q2 attendance, Q3 attendance, and then I put them all together, appended them. We just started Q4,
Mhm.
so I'm gonna need to add another list to it.
Yes.
How do, like, can I just append it? And then how do I make sure that it pushes out with all of the right information?
It's really simple. So let's see if we can get that open and I can show you attendance report. Is it this guy?
Yes.
Okay. Actually, yeah, let me cancel
I
it.
thought
I
it was
did
called
note.
student attendance.
I think you're right. I think it was student attendance report. So let's go grab it. There we go. Student
Yeah.
attendance report. And somebody had asked the question about kind of appending this. So Jocelyn, how do I get on the registrar's group email? I don't know who manages that. Let me send a note. Jocelyn, I've got your info from signing up for the session. I'll forward it to the list and whoever runs it will get you added. But it's a phenomenal group. I think most of the users on here are members.
Trying to bring it back up to right screen.
Nancy, thank you. Do you want to add Jocelyn? There we go. It should.
Nope, sorry. It keeps going to the other screen. There we go.
All right, beautiful. So, somebody asked us to contrast these. She's just done a much nicer job of building filters that are clean and formatted. We just kind of quickly threw them at the wall, but it's very, very similar to what we did on the other side. But then it looks like in these visuals, Amy's just got some nice filters baked in where we could very quickly see students that meet certain criteria and quickly see the details. I do have to run in just a minute. I've got a 2 o'clock, but Amy, let me look with you at how we can add that additional query. So if we edit the query, basically on the Blackbaud side, just build an exact copy of your other 3 lists, change your filter, pull just Q4. And then in here, I bet all that we need to do is, let me jump into the advanced editor. A lot of times when we do the appending, it just lets us select an additional entry and we can just tie it in. But sometimes we can see that more cleanly through the advanced editor. Yeah, here we go. So that combined, we would just grab the attendance Q4, just literally just kind of add it in right here.
Yep.
And once that exists, and once you've fed that in to serve as the, a piece of the report, it'll just grab everything for you and then it'll do the rest from there. But it's truly that simple.
Awesome. Great. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. All right, guys, and I am going to run, but thank you for the time. Please reach out if you've got questions or if I can help any school with some of the setup. I see a bunch of my clients on here already, which is wonderful. Thank you guys for joining, but always looking for opportunities to work with new schools as well. So thank you guys and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thank you.
Bye-bye.